I still had cemetery clay under my nails when Lenora Klein slid an envelope across the kitchen island, like she was handing me a restaurant bill. No sympathy, no soft voice, no pause to let me breathe, just paper on polished stone. I hadn't even taken off the black coat I wore to my father's burial. My hair still smelled like rain and lilies and that cold, metallic scent the ground gives off when it's been freshly turned. The house was too quiet in the way big houses get after a funeral, like the walls are listening, waiting for the next person to decide what the grief is worth. Lenora sat on one of the stools, posture perfect, legs crossed, sipping sparkling water from one of my mother's crystal glasses, and around her throat, resting right at the base like a claim, was my mother's amber locket, the one from every photograph, the one I used to press between my fingers as a kid while Mom kneaded dough and hummed off key. Lenora tapped the envelope with a manicured nail and said, almost bored, "You'll want to read that carefully." I opened it. Notice to vacate. 21 days. 21 days like I was a stranger who'd overstayed a weekend, like I hadn't grown up under this roof. Like I hadn't spent the last year keeping the orchard and cidery afloat while she paraded around town collecting sympathy like tips. She watched my face the way people watch a candle to see when it gutters. Then she said it. Smooth, measured, practiced. "You're a leftover from a chapter I'm closing." I looked down at the notice, then at her, then at the locket on her throat. Lenora wasn't just trying to move me out. She was trying to erase me. To the outside world, Lenora was devotion in a designer blazer. The devoted second wife. The graceful widow who fought right alongside my father through his final year. People in town would clasp her hands and tell her how strong she was, and she'd tilt her head, eyes shining at exactly the right angle, and whisper about how hard it all had been. Technically, my father did fight. Elliot Mercer fought a slow, ugly illness that turned weeks into waiting rooms and made time feel like damp wool you couldn't shake off. But what people didn't see was how Lenora positioned herself between him and the rest of the world, like a velvet rope with a smile. It started small, the way control always does. "Elliot needs rest today, Nora. No visitors." "The nurse you hired makes him anxious. I found someone better." "Don't bring him business stress. He doesn't need to hear about the orchard." The someone better always ended up being someone who answered to her. The phone stopped being on his nightstand. The email password changed. The number of times he was sleeping when I visited increased like a graph you didn't want to study. If I did get to speak to him, I could feel it. Someone else listening, someone else shaping the room. Like my father's own house had become a stage, and Lenora was both director and audience. And while she played grief for the public, I did the work she couldn't be bothered to learn. Mercer Orchard and Cidery wasn't just a pretty place for weekend tastings and autumn photos. It was 32 acres outside Hood River, Oregon. Heritage trees, steep rows, old irrigation quirks, soil that demanded respect. Some of those trees were older than the people who came to our seasonal festivals and called it quaint. I was 25, trained in fermentation science, and I knew the orchard like some people know their own pulse. I could tell you which blocks ripened early, which rows were susceptible to rot, which trees needed pruning with patience instead of speed. I could smell a stuck fermentation before the numbers confirmed it. I could walk into the press room and hear, from the pitch of a pump, whether something was wrong. While Lenora talked about lifestyle and repositioning the brand, I was the one up at 2 a.m. during press season checking bricks and acidity, fixing hoses with numb fingers, negotiating distribution so we didn't lose shelf space, and doing math at the kitchen table so the crew got paid on time. She wore wealth like perfume. I manufactured it the hard way. Mud, yeast, bruises, and mornings that started before the sun could pretend it cared. People used to ask me why I stayed, why I didn't leave when I turned 18, why I didn't run from the tension and the cold dinners, and Lenora's gaze that always felt like she was measuring my worth in inches. They said I was clinging, that I liked being the victim, That I had a martyr complex. They didn't understand the kind of chain you can't photograph. The invisible one that ties you to a place because the place is more than land. It's your mother's hands in the soil, your father's name on the sign, the history that shaped you before you had a say. I didn't stay because I was scared of Lenora. I stayed because leaving would have been handing her the keys to my family's life work without a fight. Because if I walked away, she would turn our orchard into a photo backdrop and call it healing. So I stayed. Quietly. Patiently. Like a person guarding a match in a storm. And 2 days after we buried my father, she served me a notice to vacate like she was swatting a fly. Lenora didn't even wait for her own deadline to start acting like the house was a storage unit she could empty for profit. The morning after she served the notice, the sound of a diesel engine in the driveway pulled me to the window. A moving truck sat there with polite branding and men in white gloves, the kind of company that calls itself estate transition specialists, so they don't have to say what they really do. Lenora stood on the porch with a clipboard, directing them like a wedding planner. She wasn't crying, she wasn't distant, she was efficient. They carried out my father's things, his walnut writing desk where he used to do payroll and sign contracts, his fly fishing gear, the antique press wheel we kept in the tasting room as a nod to the old days, framed photos stacked like junk, his books, his chair. Each item left the house like a piece of him being peeled away and sold by the pound. I walked outside and asked, "What are you doing?" Lenora didn't look guilty. She didn't even look surprised that I'd object. She just smiled like I'd interrupted her morning yoga. "I'm streamlining," she said. "This place has too much clutter." "That's Dad's," I said, voice tight. She sipped her drink and replied, "Everything here is marital property, sweetheart. You're not the spouse. You're an adult child who never moved out." The way she said adult child made my skin crawl, like I was an embarrassing pet she couldn't believe was still in the house. Then she added casually, as if announcing brunch plans, "I have a meeting later with an events consultant." An events consultant. Not an orchard manager, not an agricultural specialist, not a fermentation consultant. Events. The full picture clicked into place with a nausea that felt physical. Lenora didn't want to keep the orchard. She wanted to convert it. She wanted to bulldoze the oldest rows, our heirloom blocks, the trees my mother loved most because they were stubborn and complex, and replace them with a parking lot, a pavilion, a glamping lane, and a gravel drive wide enough for wedding caravans. She said it out loud, in my father's kitchen. "Apple trees are cute, but weddings are scalable." Scalable. Like my mother's hands pruning in February, like my father's back bending under harvest bins, like my childhood. Just cute. I didn't argue, not because I didn't want to, because arguing with Lenora was like yelling at a security camera. It doesn't change what happens, it just records your desperation. Instead, I went upstairs, packed a duffel bag, and carried it past her like I was surrendering. Lenora's smile widened with satisfaction. "Good," she said. "Make sure you don't take anything that isn't yours." I stopped, turned, and looked at her long enough for the air to change. "I'm not leaving," I said. "I'm repositioning." She frowned like the concept didn't fit into her worldview, and I walked down to the one place she never entered, not because it was forbidden, but because it was work. The root cellar. The cellar was cold in a way that felt honest. It smelled like damp wood and apple skin and fermentation, like a place where time mattered more than appearances. Lenora hated it because it didn't care who she married. It didn't care how expensive her shoes were. It cared about temperature control, cleanliness, and patience. I walked past the racks where we stored reserve bottles, past the old crates marked with harvest years. I stopped at one crate that always made my father smile when he thought no one was watching. 2001. Winter Reserve. The year my mother died. My father used to say, "When the orchard feels heavy, that's the year you open. It reminds you we've survived worse." I pulled the crate out and pried the lid up, expecting dusty bottles. Instead, there was straw, carefully arranged. And under the straw sat a small, fireproof safe. Beside it was a thick envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting, blocky and slightly shaky, unmistakably his. My breath caught in a way I didn't expect. Not grief, not exactly. Something sharper. I sat on the cellar steps and opened the envelope. The letter began, "Nora, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if Lenora has already started moving fast, it means I was right." I didn't cry in a loud way. I cried in a quiet way, the kind where your body refuses to make a spectacle because it's too busy trying to survive the feeling. Relief hit first. Heavy relief, like someone had finally told me I wasn't crazy. My father hadn't been blind. He saw her. He saw me. He wrote about catching glimpses of bank alerts she tried to hide, about invoices that didn't match shipments, about the way she dismissed nurses and replaced them with friends of friends. He wrote about pretending to sleep while she spoke about me like I was a parasite living off her life. Then he wrote the sentence that changed everything in my chest. "I couldn't fight her loudly, Nora, so I fought her legally." Inside the safe, he said, was the structure. The thing Lenora couldn't charm or threaten or stall in probate. He told me to take it to Mason Ward, his longtime attorney, executor, and the only man my father trusted to hold a secret without turning it into gossip. At the bottom, my father added, "Don't give her a warning. The trap works only if she thinks she's winning." My hands steadied. My mind sharpened. Upstairs, Lenora was planning to flatten history and sell the view. She had no idea my father had left me a match and soaked her world in gasoline. I opened the safe using the code he'd written in the letter. Inside was a flash drive, a thick packet of documents, and a single sheet labeled in clean type. Instructions. If Lenora moves against Nora. I drove straight to Mason Ward's office without calling ahead, the safe buckled into the passenger seat like it belonged there more than anything Lenora had ever touched. The receptionist started to speak when I walked in, then saw my face and just pointed down the hall. Mason looked up from his desk and exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for a year. "I wondered when you'd come," he said quietly. He locked the door behind me. I set the safe on his desk, slid the documents across, and watched his eyes scan the first page. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't look surprised. He plugged in the flash drive and opened a folder. His jaw tightened once, just once, like a man seeing something confirmed that he'd been hoping was unnecessary. Then he said, "Okay." Just okay, like he'd found the missing piece in a puzzle. "Nora," he said, "your father moved Mercer Orchard into an irrevocable land and business trust 2 years ago." The words didn't land all at once. They landed like steps in the dark, careful, solid, real. Mason continued. "The land, the equipment, the brand, the tasting room agreements, you are the primary beneficiary, and you become managing trustee upon his death." My fingers went numb. "So Lenora..." Mason lifted a hand. "Lenora has occupancy rights under a spousal support agreement, but those rights are conditional." He flipped to a page with yellow highlighting and tapped a paragraph with his pen. "This is what your father called the forfeiture trigger." Forfeiture trigger, technical, precise, undeniable. Mason summarized in plain language, Lenora would receive a generous monthly payout and limited use of the main house as long as she did not attempt to sell any trust assets, interfere with the managing trustee's operation of the orchard, or serve notice to remove the managing trustee, me, from the property within 30 days of my father's death. If she violated any of those conditions, her support ended immediately and permanently. Her right to occupy ended too. Mason looked up at me. "How long after the funeral did she give you a vacate notice?" 2 days, I said. "And she's already moving assets?" "This morning." Mason leaned back and let silence sit for a moment, then said, "Then she's already breached the agreement. She has already voided her own support." My pulse thudded in my ears, not panic, clarity. "So what happens now?" Mason's voice stayed calm. almost gentle. Now we notify her in writing that she is no longer authorized to occupy the property. Then we begin lawful removal. I blinked. Removal as in sheriff? Mason nodded. Removal as in your father designed this so she couldn't trap you in probate delays. He didn't want you spending your 20s fighting a parasite in court. Something in me unclenched, not joy. Not yet, but the end of a long, grinding tension I'd learned to call normal. Mason printed a formal notice, stamped it, and slid it into a folder. You said she's meeting a realtor? He asked. Tomorrow morning, I replied, in the kitchen. Mason stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, Perfect. Let's not ruin her schedule. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. Lenora sat there in a cream blazer, expensive enough to scream money, subtle enough to pretend it whispered. Across from her sat a realtor with a leather portfolio and the kind of tight smile that sells dream properties to people who call lawns grounds. They were mid-laugh when I entered, like my grief was background music. Lenora looked up. Oh, you're still here. I poured myself coffee, slowly. The ordinary movement felt like power. Then I sat at the head of the table, not theatrically, just matter of fact, like it had always been my seat. Lenora's smile sharpened. This is a professional meeting. So is mine, I said. I slid Mason's letter across the table. The realtor glanced at it politely and then looked away, like she'd been trained not to witness explosions. Lenora picked up the paper with 2 fingers, as if it might stain her. She read the first paragraph and frowned, confused. She read the second, and her mouth parted slightly. Then she reached the section that spelled out breach, termination of spousal payout, termination of occupancy, and immediate surrender of premises. Her face went blank, not calm, not composed, blank, like someone unplugged her. She whispered, This isn't real. It's real, I said. Dad planned for you. Her eyes snapped up. He would never. He did, I cut in, voice still quiet. He just didn't advertise it because he knew you'd behave exactly like this. Her hands began to tremble. The paper made a soft rattling sound against the table, pathetic in its fragility. The realtor cleared her throat. Lenora, I think I should go. Lenora snapped. No, sit down. The realtor stood anyway, already sliding her portfolio into her bag like she'd smelled smoke. Lenora turned back to me, voice rising, cracking at the edges. I sacrificed for that man. You managed him, I said. You controlled who saw him. You controlled his phone. You controlled his care. And the second he died, you treated his life like a storage unit. Lenora shoved the letter away. You're lying. I nodded once, like I could afford to let her believe whatever she needed. Okay. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket and placed it on the table. What is that? She demanded. That, I said, is confirmation the deputy is already on his way. Mason filed everything an hour ago. Lenora stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. You cannot do this to me. I'm not doing it to you, I said. You did it to yourself. You just didn't read the fine print. She stared at me like she was trying to remember who I was, like she'd spent so long treating me as furniture she forgot furniture can be bolted down. Then she hissed, Where am I supposed to go? I took a sip of coffee, letting the pause do the work. The same place you planned for me, I said. Somewhere else. When the deputy arrived, he was polite in that way law enforcement can be when the paperwork is clean and the situation is painfully common. Lenora tried every angle, crying, shouting, explaining her rights, accusing me of manipulation. She talked about devotion and sacrifice and fairness as if feelings could override contracts. But the documents were clear, and the breach was clear. The deputy gave her time to pack essentials. Lenora stormed through the house, slamming drawers and yanking clothes off hangers, knocking picture frames off shelves like she was punishing the walls for not loving her. At one point, she reached for my mother's amber locket and tried to tear it off her own neck, like she wanted to throw it into the sink and watch it clatter. I caught her wrist. Not violent, not dramatic, just firm. That stays, I said. She looked at my hand on her wrist, then at my face, and for the first time she looked genuinely afraid of me. Not because I was stronger, but because she realized I wasn't negotiating anymore. She dropped the locket into my palm like it burned her. 40 minutes later, Lenora walked down the gravel driveway with 2 suitcases and a designer tote bag. Her heels sank into the wet ground. She paused once and turned back, like she expected the house to apologize and beg her to return. It didn't. Neither did I. Her car disappeared down the road, and the orchard went quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not the tense quiet of eggshells, not the suffocating quiet of waiting for the next insult. Just quiet. Deep, heavy quiet. Like the air after a storm moves on. That evening, I walked out to the oldest row of trees, the heritage block my father refused to replace, even when accountants told him it was inefficient. The branches were bare for winter, black lines against a pale sky. The ground was cold and rich under my boots, alive in a dormant way, as if it was saving energy for spring. I brought a bottle of our reserve cider, the one my dad used to call the honest batch because it wasn't sweetened or dressed up. I didn't drink it. I opened it and poured a slow circle at the roots of the oldest tree. Not for revenge, for gratitude. For my mother, who planted saplings with dirt under her nails and hope in her throat. For my father, who endured silence long enough to build something stronger than Lenora's greed. People talk about revenge like it's destruction, like you win by burning everything down. But the cleanest revenge I've ever tasted wasn't hurting Lenora. It was protecting what she couldn't understand. She wanted to flatten history and sell the view. I kept the roots, and for the first time in my life, the weight in my chest wasn't fear. It was ownership. It was responsibility. It was the strange, steady feeling of a future that finally belonged to me.